We want our belief system to be protected. We want our knowledge to be protected. And our knowledge plays a very critical role in climate change resilience.
Welcome back, everybody. Rich Baker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here today with another episode of the Sustainable Ambassador Podcast. Through this podcast, I'm speaking with professionals in the sustainability field, talking about environmental, social, and challenges faced, but more than that, the work that they're doing to solve these challenges that we see in our economies, our environments, our communities. For me, the simple goal here is to educate, inspire, and equip the viewers to take their next steps along their own sustainable journey. It's a journey I hope that will result in the development and deployment of sustainable solutions, programs, platforms, and/or collaborations. In this episode, I'm extremely honored to be joined by Ms. Preity Gurung, who spent the last 5 years as a program officer in Nepal at the Center for Indigenous Peoples Research and Development. Through her work, she's working for the recognition of Indigenous peoples' knowledge, cultural values, and customary institutions that contribute to a sustainable management of forest, ecosystem, biodiversity, and most importantly, climate resilience. And so with that, Preity, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. It's really great to have you with us.
Thank you, Richard. It's my pleasure to be talking to you. And thank you for inviting me.
So, as a starting point, I always like to ask, who are you and what is the work that you're doing?
I am Preity Gurung. I am from Nepal and I belong to Tamang indigenous community from Dhading district. We are situated in mid-hill regions of Nepal. And like you introduced, I've been working with Center for Indigenous Peoples Research and Development. We are called CIPRED in short. I've been working there since last 5 years. And I started my journey as an intern and now I'm working as a program officer.
What is CIPRED? What's the work that you're doing? Who are you working with? And what are some of the goals that you have as an organization?
So CIPRED was established back in 2011 with an objective of protecting our indigenous knowledge, which is on the verge of disappearance. We started this organization as we realized there is a lack of documentation of these knowledge systems because all our knowledge systems are only orally transmitted from one generation to another. So when our executive director, when she advocated with government saying that, please ensure our rights, it's our right to the land where we are staying and right to enter the forest and continue our traditional livelihood. And the government official said, where is the proof? Where is it written that, you have been living this way? Where is the evidence? And that's how CIPRED was established to generate these evidence, and we do evidence-based policy advocacy.
So then, besides kind of formally recognizing your practices and systems, what are some of the main projects that you currently work on? Because you mentioned forestry, biodiversity, and climate resilience. Like, how do these things kind of interact?
Yes. So we have various working areas in CIPRED. So one of the working area is customary tenure rights. So what we do there is we identify the customary practices of indigenous people in Lamjung district and Gorkha district. Those are the two districts where we are trying to identify how is customarily forest managed there. And what we do is we document the cases. And then our local staff not only documents, but advocates with the local government. It's closely working in close coordination with the local government. And then local government has recognized in their local forest act. And the other thing is the rights-based conservation. All the conservation areas in Nepal, they have been established without the free and prior consent of indigenous people. And when they were established, huge number of indigenous people were displaced from their ancestral territories. And to this date, they have not been fairly compensated. So what we do is we are again documenting the lived experiences of these indigenous communities. And we produce video documentary, we produce report, we produce case studies, and then we advocate not just at the local level, but we organize national level validation workshops where we bring in government agencies, relevant government agencies like DNPWC, Department of National Park and Wildlife Conservation. And the climate change also, we indigenous people, we are located in the areas which are highly vulnerable, where we see the higher climatic hazards. Like in the higher mountain region, we see the glacier lake outburst. We see this erratic rainfall pattern. And then in the Tarai region, we see, flooding. So their indigenous people, they are highly vulnerable.
Back up a second here and ask, Okay, so you do research, then it leads to advocacy as well as kind of certification in a sense. Like you're certifying these people have rights to land, to culture, to their systems. Do you also do programming on site to kind of solve the problems? Like, have you moved into that phase, or do you see yourself really as kind of like a document advocacy type organization?
So our role is majorly is to do the research, documentation, and then the policy advocacy, as well as also capacitating the local community and local government also. Sometimes local government themselves, they don't know how to formulate certain policies. So what we do is we provide them technical support, and we also bring in lawyers, and we provide them support, and we bring legal recognition. What we do with the community members is we firstly inform them about the existing policies, because those policies are not formulated with the consultation of the community, what community wants. They don't, those policies are made in the central level, by the central government. So the local government and the community do not know about it, the community mainly. So what we do is we inform them about the existing policies, and we tell them about the gaps, and we tell them about the international instruments like CBD, UN DRIP, ILO 169. What we do is we build their self-determined development. We build their determination. We can't be there all the time to advocate for them. They need to advocate for their own rights, and they need to know firstly what are their rights.
Now, in that respect, I mean, oftentimes you kind of blame the government or blame, so like, is it your goal to kind of create empowerment within these communities so that they can then actually fix their own problems? Is that kind of part of what you're doing here? And how does that influence the way that you do your research? Like you talk about self-determined development, like do you ask questions that actually try to understand like the challenges to their own self-determination? And if so, like how important is it to be in the communities when you're doing this work?
So, indigenous community, our way of conducting research is different than the scientific research. So, what we are trying to do is we were trying to do indigenous-led research work. By that, what we do is we don't go there as only to questioning them and trying to figure out the issues, but also we engage them. When we are doing research about indigenous knowledge, their worldviews is very important, and oftentimes it can be misinterpreted. So we always engage the community leaders and the women and the youth and elders. Elders are knowledge holders, women are also knowledge holders, and we engage youth in every activity, because we believe that once youth are engaged and youth are also sensitized, aware about what their cultural value is and the importance of protecting those cultural values and practices, that way we can bring change.
Now, when it comes to that perspective, many of these problems are cultural in nature, they have long history, sometimes they're political. What's the role of climate on top of that? Does it exacerbate the problems? Does it create new problems? How does that kind of come into this and into the work that you're doing?
And there are some communities life, whose way of life, whose culture practices, whose livelihood, dependent on river. Those people are called Maji. Their life was slowly dependent on river. Now that river is inside the protected area, and they are not allowed to enter. So they are now living in buffer zone. And these buffer zone areas, the whole area, the entire district, is highly vulnerable to flooding. And youth have all migrated because they see no hope. They see no hope of any, since they see no hope, they are migrating. The men are migrating. So there is only women who are cultivating a small piece of land, but it's always flooding, and it's always the human wildlife conflict. There is yeah, wildlife attack, and there is no, and whatever land they're cultivating, it's given by government, a small piece of land. They don't own it. So all these problems exist, and then the climate change exacerbate, yeah, it just intensifies the problem.
Um, so you've been with the organization for 5 years. How important is it for you to be out in the field working with, these communities that you're trying to protect? And what have you learned from working with these people?
Before working with CIPRED, I was a student of Master in Sustainable Development, and I got the internship opportunity at CIPRED. And it is while working at CIPRED, all the theoretical knowledge that was given to us, inclusivity, intersectionality, Jesse, participatory research approach, everything that was taught to us, I had an eye-opening experience while working at CIPRED. It was in one of the field visit to these conservation areas where I saw from my own eyes the layers of problems an indigenous women goes through, the layers of problem. And then they are not educated, and then they don't have a basic earning. They don't have even 5,000 Nepali rupees to pay tuition fee, I mean, school fee. So their childrens, they don't study after fifth grade. They go to nearby towns in India and other countries for labor work. So that was the eye-opening moment for me, and everything made sense, all that I studied during my master's degree. And that's when I realized my true passion that I want to continue this. And I also started appreciating my own identity. Yeah, and that's when I realized that going to field is much more important than sitting at the desk and doing literature review written by some third person, who is not aware about indigenous worldviews. And
Well, I mean, it's interesting because you had this kind of this great internship experience. What do you think that that was what has propelled you into the space? Like, were you thinking about being in the space before that, or were you thinking of a different career? And like you mentioned, kind of like that eye-opening experience. Was that the moment that you realized that okay, this is going to be my career?
exactly, it was after that experience I realized I want to continue this work from entire life. I want to continue this work till my last breath. And every year I go to new place, I meet different indigenous community, and then I see different issue there. Nepal is trying to trying to achieve its NDC, like they're trying to achieve green energy. So many hydropowers are establishing, but who are displaced? It's the indigenous communities who are being displaced. So we have that another issue. So, I realized that when I meet those people, and I had one study done on Red Plus. Yeah, I forgot to mention you. The GCF concept note study, that's also an area of Red Plus area, study area. So now the government is soon receiving the performance-based incentives. Now these community, I along with my the colleague, we went to this study area and we asked them, do you know about Red? Because we had gone there to know if community knows about Red Plus project, because they will soon receive the money. But the community said, are you talking about a Red Cross? And we said, no, no, there is another Red Plus. There is another Red. And then they said, okay, are you talking about Red Panda? Like, that's how unaware community is. Whereas it is them who is protecting the forest. It is them who have been protecting since many generations. But who are getting the incentives? It's the government, local government they're getting, but the local government and DFOs are not making the community aware about.
So how do you make it? How do you change that? Like, I'm curious. You have a bunch of communities who seemingly aren't able to protect themselves. They're using old customs and, history, and hopefully maybe they get someone recognizes them. But then you have, governments, local, national, and companies as well that are involved in this, who their interest is actually on the opposite side. Like, how do you fix that?
So how we fix that is always through research. Yeah, because there are other INGOs also who are doing research in the same area. But what we do is we do from the voices of the community, because nobody can better explain about their relation with the land and the surrounding landscape. So we try to articulate those relation, the bond in our research, and we try to articulate the impact, not just the impact on their economy or the impact on their lives, but the overall impact on their traditional livelihood. So what we do is we not only engage with the local government, we also engage with others relevant stakeholders, such as when we were doing this project, we engaged with DFO, because it is the local government and the DFO who's supposed to, together distribute the incentives. And we always identify the key stakeholders, and we make sure we have layers and layers of sensitization. It is not an easy process. It takes many years to, finally sensitize them and bring them in the policy, recognized by the policy.
So why did you make this your career? Like you have a kind of an eye-opening experience, but why decide to make this your career? And what motivates you for the last 5 years to keep working? Is it the stories of impact? Is it the success you're having? Is it that you're just generally very passionate about the topic? Like, it's a very complex topic. So why make this your career and what keeps you going for the last 5 years?
Because being a student of sustainable development, leaving no one behind, I feel like we cannot achieve sustainability without ensuring the rights of Indigenous people. And, when after meeting those people, I feel like, I don't speak as only Tharu community and specific community. It is us. It's collective we Indigenous people. And you remember, when I introduced myself, I said I belong to Tamang Indigenous community, whereas my last name is Gurung. I said that because now I am proud to be called Tamang. Actually, because of some dispute long time ago, my grandfather had changed his last name to Tamang. The dispute is from the government itself. The government did not allow Tamang Indigenous community to pursue army services. So my grandfather wanted to enter into army. So he had to change his last name into Gurung because Gurungs were allowed. And I always preferred introducing myself as Preity Gurung and never clarified I'm actually Tamang. So, the change is the actually internalizing. I myself realize who actually I am, and why it's important that, after my mother's it's my generation, and my children's will not know what makes us Tamil, the distinct identity, language, practices, which are all very important to maintain, not just maintain our identity, but back in my village, the surrounding environment is intact. So if you want us to live, all these nature-based solutions, sustainable development goals, I believe all this can be achieved if you follow a worldview, if you follow the values of, never sustainably extracting from nature, protecting nature. I would like to tell you there is one community in Gorkha, they're called Chumba people. They have this customary governance called Shagya. These customary governance has 6 rules. Based on their 6 rules, their region is now declared the non-violence region. None of the biodiversity is impacted there, even an ant, because they follow Buddhist principles. And those things really made me question all these nature-based solutions that I read about, all these sustainable goals that I was working for an NGO. Then they always said, like, if you achieve so and so targets, we are contributing to so and so goals of sustainable development. So I realized, like, actually, to live sustainably is to live how we lived, yeah, consciously, to live consciously, yeah.
So, how do you balance that? Because actually, most of the world is thinking science based targets, SDGs, nature based solutions, carbon credits, like these big frameworks. But you're just saying, look, let's just live simply as we did before. That doesn't really work in a modern world sometimes. So, how do you balance those two things? And how do you help Indigenous communities maybe adapt a little bit to the current practices?
So what we did is, okay, we cannot tell them don't pursue education, right? It is important to pursue education, but what we are trying is education system also recognize us. There should be curriculums that teaches the students about the Indigenous people's worldviews, and also what we are trying to do with the government's goals. We're saying, okay, we will meet the sustainable development goal, but not by leaving behind these people who are in the community, who have no idea about government's plans, what government is organizing centrally. So we make them aware about it, and we make try to convince government to whatever your initiative is, please meaningfully engage them, take the free prior informed consent, and do development that's more what's needed in the community. We should also respect the nature. We are not saying that you have to live this old way of life, but I think customary practices, cultural practices is something you should not completely, forget, or you should completely leave behind. And the belief system, belief should continue. You believe in respecting certain water source, certain tree, certain area which needs to be clean, the surrounding needs to be clean. Then why not we continue to, keep it that way? We want our belief system to be protected. We want our knowledge to be protected. And our knowledge plays a very critical role in climate change resilience because we have been living in that area. We know what biodiversity is found where, and how you could, in the time of crisis, like in the time of COVID, we did not face a lot of problems because we could simply go into the forest and we can survive. But the people who lived nearby the conservation areas, protected areas, they faced problems. Yeah, they struggled because our government is not it couldn't provide support to every community, to everyone, right? We don't have strong economic.
I would argue you're very clear about the communities that you're serving, and you're using tools that have been developed by others to hopefully elevate those concerns, influence policy. What have you learned about how to engage the government? Because I feel like you could have the best research, you could know your community the best, you could know exactly but what have you learned about how to speak with government, how to not influence them, but engage them, help them with awareness, and then hopefully over time influence policy?
Uh, so working with the government is tough most of the time because many of these government officials, like I said earlier, it's based on the caste system. It's all the Brahmins, the higher caste, and they really don't understand us. And we are in the government, but slowly we are getting into that role. But mostly it's them. So it's difficult to convince them. But when you're not very radical, when you have an evidence, when you're talking with an evidence, and when you have a back support from global, all these global advocacy that we are doing and other IPOs are doing at the global level, it's actually forcing government to recognize us. It's actually mandating government to, engage us in the consultation workshop. And with the local government, it's we try to empower the community to come into that position because it's possible at the local government. And the Shagya is now recognized as the Chum Shagya Conservation Act. We were able to do as in Conservation Act. It is because we empowered community leader to become rural municipality chairperson because he already had a support from his people, right? So we empowered him. We said, like, you must become the rural municipality chairperson. Only then you can influence the policy. Only then you can, say the tourists to please not hunt, or please not disobey the six rules. Only then you can say the army men who, because their area also falls under Manaslu conservation area. So you cannot you cannot tell army to not harm the biodiversity if it's not through laws, if it's not a legal law. Just because it's a community's protocol, why will army follow? So we after our sensitization, he then was elected as chairperson, and it was then we were able to influence other government representatives and bring the legal recognition. And now they can proudly, make budget, make strategic plans, and continue the way of life. Yeah.
Okay. So besides government, Who else are you working with, say in collaboration, partnership, or who you're aligned to so that you can advance the mission and advance the work?
Besides government, it's always the local community also. So we are two different entities, local community and indigenous people. So because obviously we are indigenous, we are the first people, we have distinct identity, but it's also local community who is living along with us and who are facing similar problems. But so what we do is we work in collaboration with them. We work with the Federation of Local Community, like Community Forestry Federation, we work with them, and other CSOs, we work with CSOs, and we work with other IPOs, like Federation of Indigenous Nationalities. Yeah, and then the youth federation, because we believe that engaging youth is the only solution.
Okay. I want to back up to your comments about the youth and how they're really going to be the ones who solve this in the future. Why do you think that, and how do you empower them?
So why do I think that is because they are the future generations. They are the generation who will then, transfer the knowledge. Since our knowledge is all orally transmitted, since we want to live in this healthy environment, so living in harmony is the key, and living with your true identity. So we have been engaging indigenous youth, and we follow a principle called Indigenous Peoples Sustainable Self-Determined Development, where I told you, like, we inform them about the existing policy, international instruments, ways of conducting policy advocacy, and also we give them the budget to do their own to do their own so they do their research about their own community. So we give them a, yeah, budget. And many of the indigenous youth many of the students are also from local community, because slowly people are understanding it's important that scientific knowledge and indigenous knowledge should be, hand in hand in order to, yeah, have a sustainable future,
Now,
equitable and sustainable.
further transferring the knowledge, if you were speaking to someone who's a student right now, looking at their first internship, just as you were 5, 6 years ago, and they were interested in, say, indigenous rights or national resource governance or climate advocacy, they view this as their potential career. What advice would you give them to get started on that path?
The advice I would give them is to actually just go to their community once. Or, if you're from local community, go to an indigenous community. Identify, do some work, like do some research work about that will really motivate you and bring that passion in you. And if you are interested in climate change, you can always go to, there are specific areas which are impacted by climate change. You can see the best practices of natural resource management done by indigenous people who are still continuing to continue the practices. So I think I would always suggest them to have a practical knowledge. That's when everything becomes clear, which I went through, yeah.
Now, once they have that practical knowledge, they understand the community, are there specific skills or experiences you recommend that they try to really develop early on?
I think you should firstly be passionate, to be passionate about something. Like I was passionate about learning about indigenous people, which is why I happily did internship for 6 months. And then I slowly became aware about the issue. And I think the other skills that they would need is to know how to conduct research, to know how to collect these studies, to be patient, to be able to listen to people, to be ethical, and to be empathy. You should have empathy. You if without those things, if you go to community, and I think the community will also not respond you. Uh, with what you desire to know, right? So if they're giving you your time, I think you should respect their time and have those morals and be compassionate and have the empathy, yeah, and know basic research.
So now you've been in the space for 5 years, and you've been very clear this is your passion, this is your future career. What do you see as your future path? Are you going to stay with CIPRED and just kind of come up the ranks, or do you want to go work for the UN or go work for the government? Like, I think at some point everyone thinks like, I want to have the greatest impact possible. How do you look at your career going forward in art? What are the opportunities what are the skills or what are the things you want to accomplish, say, over the next 3, 5, 10 years?
I'm not after getting positions, and I'm also not after working for UN specifically or any INGO specifically. I don't have those institutions in my mind, but I what I do have is to make myself more capable um, doing research, learning the research methodology, because whatever work I'm doing, I think if I'm further more capable, I can create more impact. And that is through a PhD, because I really want to pursue PhD, and I'm just thinking about whether to do in indigenous knowledge, or do in anthropology. So I'm just thinking about that, yeah. And I think once I have that degree and I come back, I can produce much more quality research. I can write journal articles, and those will be even a stronger evidence for advocate and stronger evidence to influence policies, and globally also I can make good intervention, meaningful interventions. Yeah.